Welcome, friends. Are you sitting comfortably? Today, I would like to tell you the tale of the Scottish Brownie clan and how they came to help the Frasers. A story that takes place in the remote, mist-shrouded hills of the Scottish Highlands, where ancient forces still linger in the shadows between our world and theirs. The Scottish Highlands, a place of breathtaking beauty and terrible isolation. Rolling hills of heather give way to dense, primeval forests where sunlight struggles to penetrate the canopy. Stone circles older than memory dot the landscape, their original purpose long forgotten. The locals speak in hushed tones of the old ones who inhabit these lands, creatures neither human nor beast, who watch from the corners of your vision. It was to this haunted landscape that Sarah Fraser, her husband David, and their two young children, Jane and James, would journey in the summer of 2024, unaware of the ancient pact they were about to inherit. Their life in London had become increasingly desperate. David had lost his delivery job, leaving Sarah, a stay-at-home mother, to worry endlessly about their mounting bills. The children could sense the tension, the whispered arguments after bedtime, the forced smiles that never reached their parents' eyes. Then came the letter. Yellowed parchment with handwriting so spidery it seemed to crawl across the page. It was from an aunt Sarah had never known existed, inviting them to her remote Highland croft for the summer. A respite, the letter promised, a chance to breathe. "It's strange," Sarah told David that night, the letter trembling in her hands. "The way she writes, it's almost as if she was expecting us to need somewhere to go." David examined the letter, his brow furrowing. "How did she even know where we live? You've never met her." "Perhaps my mother told her before she died," Sarah suggested, though uncertainty lingered in her voice. That night, as they slept, both dreamt of a vast Highland estate shrouded in mist and tiny eyes watching from the darkness. The journey north was long and increasingly isolated. Their GPS failed as they ventured deeper into the Highlands, forcing them to rely on the hand-drawn map that had accompanied the letter. The children grew restless, then unnaturally quiet as the landscape became wilder, the road narrowing until it was little more than a dirt track cutting through ancient woodland. "Are we lost, Daddy?" James asked, his small voice barely audible over the car's struggling engine. "No, son," David replied, though his white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel suggested otherwise. "Just taking the scenic route." It was then they rounded a bend and saw it, Blackthorn Croft. The farmhouse was ancient, built of dark stone that seemed to absorb the light around it. Chimneys twisted toward the sky like gnarled fingers. Windows, small and deep-set, reflected nothing but darkness. And there, standing in the doorway, was a figure so still she might have been carved from the same stone as the house. Aunt Moira. Though Sarah had never seen a photograph, she knew instantly this was her relative. The family resemblance was uncanny, yet distorted somehow, as if Sarah were looking at her own reflection in troubled water. "You've arrived at last," the old woman called, her voice carrying unnaturally across the distance. "I've been waiting such a long time." As they approached, Sarah noticed strange markings carved into the doorframe, symbols that seemed to writhe and shift when viewed from the corner of her eye. The children clung to her legs, suddenly shy. Come in," Aunt Moira ushered them inside. "You must be famished after your journey. I've prepared a feast." The interior of the farmhouse was a contradiction, immaculately clean yet ancient. The wooden beams overhead were blackened with centuries of smoke, and the stone floors worn into shallow depressions from countless footsteps. Yet not a speck of dust could be seen, and the air smelled of fresh herbs and beeswax. "The table is set," Moira gestured to a spread that would have taken hours to prepare. "I hope you'll find everything to your liking." Sarah exchanged a glance with David. They had called only that morning to confirm their arrival time. How could the old woman have prepared so much food? "It's wonderful," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "But you shouldn't have gone to such trouble." "Oh, it was no trouble," Moira replied, her smile revealing teeth too small and numerous. "I had help." That first meal was sumptuous but strange. Flavors Sarah couldn't identify danced on her tongue. The children, normally picky eaters, consumed everything placed before them with unusual enthusiasm. David, too, ate heartily, his earlier apprehensions seemingly forgotten. Only Sarah maintained her unease, noticing how Aunt Moira barely touched her own food, instead watching them eat with an intensity that made Sarah's skin crawl. "The tea is special," Moira said, pouring a dark liquid into Sarah's cup. "An old family recipe. It helps one adjust to the Highland air." The tea tasted of earth and something metallic. Sarah sipped it politely, noticing how her limbs grew heavy, her thoughts sluggish. The children's eyelids drooped, and even David stifled a yawn. "You must be exhausted," Moira said, her voice seeming to come from very far away. "Let me show you to your rooms." Sarah tried to insist on helping clear the table, but Moira was adamant. "No need, my dear, it's all in hand." As they climbed the creaking staircase, Sarah could have sworn she heard scurrying behind the walls, like dozens of tiny feet moving in concert. She turned to mention it to David, but he was already half asleep, guiding their drowsy children down the hallway. Their rooms were prepared with eerie precision. Jane's bed adorned with the exact stuffed rabbit she'd left behind in London, James's nightlight casting the same star pattern he couldn't sleep without. Sarah's favorite lavender pillow spray sat on the bedside table, though she was certain she hadn't packed it. "How did you know?" she asked Moira, fighting against the heaviness of her tongue. The old woman merely smiled. "The Brownies told me, of course. They see everything." Before Sarah could question this bizarre statement, a wave of exhaustion crashed over her. She barely made it to the bed before consciousness fled. That night, Sarah dreamed of tiny figures moving through the darkened house. They worked with silent efficiency, cleaning, repairing, preparing. In her dream, one approached her bed, its face wizened like ancient leather, eyes black and depthless. It reached out a gnarled hand to touch her forehead. "She'll do," it whispered in a voice like dry leaves rustling. "The blood is strong in this one." Sarah woke with a start, heart pounding. The room was pitch black, the kind of darkness that exists only in places far from city lights. She reached for David, but his side of the bed was empty and cold. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Sarah froze, straining to hear. Soft footsteps approached her door, too light to be an adult's. The doorknob turned slowly. Sarah held her breath as the door swung open, revealing not her children, but a small, misshapen silhouette. It stood motionless, watching her with eyes that reflected the darkness like polished obsidian. "Who's there?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. The figure retreated, moving with unnatural speed. By the time Sarah reached the doorway, the hallway was empty, or appeared to be. Yet she could feel eyes upon her, watching from cracks in the wainscoting, from the shadows between floorboards. Unable to return to sleep, Sarah made her way downstairs, drawn to a faint light in the kitchen. There she found David, sitting at the table with Aunt Moira. Between them sat a small humanoid creature with skin like tree bark and fingers too long for its hands. "Sarah," David said, his voice oddly calm, "come meet Tavish McTavish. He's the leader of the Brownie clan." The creature turned its ancient face toward her, lips pulling back to reveal needle-sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "The mistress of Blackthorn returns," it said in a voice like stones grinding together. "We've waited so long." Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "What is happening?" she demanded, gripping the doorframe for support. "You're home, dear," Aunt Moira said simply, "where you've always belonged." Over the following days, Sarah learned the truth. The Brownies were ancient creatures, bound to the land by a pact made centuries ago. They protected and served the guardians of Blackthorn Croft, but their service came with a price. "Every generation the blood must be renewed," Moira explained as they walked the boundaries of the property. Strange stones marked the perimeter, each carved with symbols that hurt Sarah's eyes if she looked too long. "I am the last of my line. I needed someone to continue the stewardship." "Why us?" Sarah asked, watching as her children played in a distant field, tiny figures darting around them just at the edge of visibility. "Blood calls to blood," Moira replied. "The Brownies chose you. They've been watching your family for generations, waiting for the right vessel." That night, as a storm raged outside, Moira revealed her final secret. She was dying, had been for years. The Brownies had sustained her until a replacement could be found. "They need a family," Moira whispered. her face gaunt in the firelight. Children. To protect, a home to tend. Without that purpose, they become something else. Lightning illuminated the windows, and for a moment, Sarah glimpsed dozens of small faces pressed against the glass, their features twisted with an emotion she couldn't name. "What happens if we refuse?" David asked, his voice steady though his hands trembled. Moira's laugh was hollow. "My dear boy, you drank the tea, you ate the food. The binding has already begun." That night, as Sarah and David whispered desperately about escape, the children's laughter echoed from their room. Sarah found them sitting in a circle with 5 brownies, playing a game with small bones that clattered on the wooden floor. "Mommy!" Jane called cheerfully. "Bramble says we're going to live here forever and ever." The brownie named Bramble turned its ancient face towards Sarah, eyes glittering with malevolent triumph. "The children are already ours," it hissed, "as you will be." In the weeks that followed, Sarah watched in horror as David surrendered to the farm's enchantment. He worked the fields with unnatural vigor, communing with the brownies as if he'd known them all his life. The children, too, changed, speaking in the brownies' strange, clicking language, disappearing for hours into the forest, only to return with no memory of where they'd been. Only Sarah resisted, though she felt the pull of the land, the whispers of the brownies in her dreams, promising power and knowledge if only she would submit. Aunt Moira weakened daily, her life force seemingly transferring to the land itself. The brownies grew more numerous, more bold. Sarah would wake to find them standing over her bed, their gnarled fingers reaching for her face. "Join us willingly," Tavish McTavish urged her one night, his voice like the creaking of ancient trees. "Those who resist suffer greatly when the change comes." On Midsummer's Eve, Moira died. The brownies keened a terrible dirge that echoed across the hills, a sound of such primal grief and rage that Sarah covered her ears to block it out. That night, as David and the children slept unnaturally deeply, Sarah made her desperate attempt to flee. She packed a small bag, took the car keys, and crept toward the door. She never reached it. The brownies emerged from every shadow, their eyes gleaming with fury. Tavish McTavish stood before her, no longer bothering to maintain his benevolent facade. "The pact cannot be broken," he snarled, his form seeming to grow larger, more monstrous. "Blackthorn must have its guardian." They swarmed her then, dozens of gnarled hands holding her down. Sarah screamed, but no sound emerged, only the rustling of leaves in a wind that wasn't there. Tavish approached, holding a cup of the same dark tea Moira had served upon their arrival. "Drink," he commanded. "Become what you were meant to be." As the liquid touched her lips, Sarah saw the truth, saw generations of her family bound to this land, to these creatures, saw what happened to those who refused the pact. The hollow-eyed shells they became, neither living nor dead, trapped in the spaces between the walls, serving the brownies for eternity. The choice was no choice at all. When morning came, Sarah Fraser stood on the porch of Blackthorn Croft, surveying her domain with new eyes. Beside her, David worked contentedly in the garden, while Jane and James played with their brownie companions, their laughter echoing across the hills. Tavish McTavish stood at her side, his ancient face creased in satisfaction. "The farm will thrive under your stewardship," he said, "as will the clan." Sarah nodded, feeling the power of the land flowing through her veins, the whispers of the brownies now clear as speech in her mind. The part of her that had been Sarah Fraser, London mother, ordinary woman, was still there, screaming from a place deep inside, but that voice grew fainter each day. "Yes," she agreed, her voice harmonizing with the wind through the trees. "We will ensure that Blackthorn remains a sanctuary for generations to come." And if travelers sometimes disappeared on the road near Blackthorn Croft, if children in nearby villages spoke of small, twisted creatures watching from the forest edge, well, that was simply the price of keeping the ancient pact. For the brownies must be fed, must be housed, must be served, and the Frasers would serve them forever.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.